Yeah.
Peter Thiel told Sam Altman years ago, I am not funding you anymore. I kicked him out of my program, and you need to get these EA people out of OpenAI now,
Yep.
or you're going to regret it. And Sam was like,
Mhm.
well, politics and things like that.
Yeah, he gave him a clear warning.
He warned them, yeah.
And then also, when Joe and I are working at Google, when you're inside these companies, you can't just get on the mic and just start talking about tech, because that will violate your NDA or get you in trouble. So instead, you get to see Lex Friedman and other people who've never been inside the corporate operation or been close to how decisions are made just pontificate on crap. Our show's very like, let's cut away from the bullshit.
We're replicating that exact thing with large language models now, and it's like that's the next big wave, and I'm very excited about it, a little bit scared too, because it seems like the interpretability loses a little bit when we go scale up reinforcement learning.
This goes back to where you started with, we're not really designing these things. And the flip side of that is, even after they've grown or developed, or however you frame it, we can't really understand how they work. And you've got a bunch of engineers and you're like, have you taken this thing apart and figured out how it works inside? And they're like, we took it apart, we put it back together again. We still don't know how it works.
Yep.
What the hell?
Yep.
Awesome, we're live. As in, we're recording, not live stream.
Yes, if I screw up, we're cutting it out, right?
Yes, of course.
See if you can spot the moment Wes realizes that nothing is being cut. If you want to skip the origin story of Wes and go straight to AI, start at 10 minutes, 25 seconds.
Joe Tarnowski is an engineer and tech leader. He's a former engineer director at Google and Facebook, and has also held roles at Apple, Microsoft, Splunk, Wealthfront, and Adobe. Jordan Thibodeau, am I saying the last name right?
Jordan Thibodeau. It's a terrible last name. We're gonna keep it on the air. Thibodeau. Yeah.
Thibodeau.
It's just French Canadian garbage. So
Jordan.
that's why I have the American flag over here, just to balance things out.
Gotcha. It's out of frame, so.
Oh,
but
wow.
I guess Riverside, you can cut it in because they're recording our full. There we.
Yeah. Here we go. This is a Fox News alert. There's a minority in your neighborhood. Go for it.
All right. Let me deliver the line without laughing here. All right. Jordan
I want to
Thibodeau.
make it the final. Let's make it the final cut. I want to end the show if we can. Go for it. Go.
What my? Oh, that yeah, definitely.
Me being
the
an asshole.
outtakes.
Yeah.
The outtakes. Love it. Jordan Thibodeau focuses on business and human side of tech. Spent 10 plus years at Google, 8 years in M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and later worked at Slack and Salesforce, giving him an understanding of tech, business and strategy, mergers and acquisitions, and organizational dynamics. He also spearheaded Google's internal talks program, interviewing luminaries like Ray Dalio and Tim Ferriss. And so Anne Wojcicki, she was the...
Anne Wojcicki, it's a fun name.
Anne Wojcicki. Was she the YouTube CEO?
23andMe CEO. Then her sister Susan ran YouTube.
Oh.
And unfortunately, Susan passed away. Rest in peace. And Susan was the one that's like, hey, go buy YouTube, which is one of the greatest acquisitions of all time.
Goodbye. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I might have to, do like an intro for my side of it later. We'll figure it out later, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that sounds good. It's correct.
Sounds
Just
good.
use it. It's good.
Yeah, it's good. You can tell we phone things in. I'm recording this at the meth lab, dude.
Use it.
So yeah.
And don't leave the comments.
So let's get into it. How did you start into, like, what's your background and then what got you into the YouTube?
Yeah. So I've been, doing stuff on the internet for a decade plus now. So I got started, first of all, on my own doing some online marketing. Right around that time, there was a person that I was following online that was very successful. He was out in Texas, I was in California, and he was launching a new startup in the e-commerce space. And he kind of reached out and he was like, hey, if you're interested, well, to his audience, so to speak, he's like, we're looking for somebody to come join us doing email marketing. So this was like 2013. So this was some time ago. And I was like, is this crazy? Just pick up and move to move across the country from California to Texas and join some startup. But I was like, let's see, let me try it. So I reached out, did a couple of interviews with them. They liked me, joined the company. I was employee number 3 and they scaled that thing. Yeah. They scaled that thing from 0 to, at the end of the year 1, they were like at 20 million plus. They ended up getting to 33 million a year. So I believe, I mean, it was a lot, tens of millions.
And how many people?
So I was employee number 3. So they had the 2 owners. Then one of the owners hired their brother-in-law, and there was the director of marketing. So it's like I was the 5th person, but I was employee number 3, I guess, technically.
Yeah,
And yeah, I was just studying online marketing under this guy that just, he was in charge of like $1 million. He was spending like $1 million a month on ads. Right. And I was just sitting there in his room, just taking notes. I'm like, all right.
Mm-hmm.
And doing
Mhm.
email marketing, doing all that stuff, doing split tests, like all the stuff that you do for that. So did that for a while. Eventually in 2016, 2015, one of the companies that I was working for, they had some internal issues, lawsuits. Oh yeah. Well, so the end of that story is the director of marketing one day had a huge problem with the main guy, got into a huge fight. He storms out. He's like, screw you guys, I'm going home.
The
And,
drama.
and so they kind of turned to me. I've been there for 2 months at that time. And they're like, well, you can do his job, right? I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
sure. Why not?
I
What
slept at
are-
a Holiday Inn Express. I'm good.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm refreshed. I'm ready. So I say yes, which I mean wasn't there yet in terms of like just rationally it should have been that strong of a yes. But I picked up what he was doing and quickly just learned a lot. So the next few months, I just learned a lot about e-commerce, online marketing, just all the tech behind it, how they were building it. Because at the time there was a lot of tech that went into it with credit cards and hosting and just
Mm.
everything. So it's not super complicated stuff. It's not rocket science, but there's just like a lot of little things that you have to know.
Mhm.
Anyways, fast forward, started my own e-commerce in 2015, 2016, did pretty well with that. That took me from kind of like having to work a job to maybe just being a little bit more, not rich, but at least I don't have to worry about that as much. And then so
Mhm.
whenever ChatGPT, so that was the end of 2022, I think, right? So Elon Musk goes, ChatGPT is getting scary good. I'm like, what is this ChatGPT thing? I look at it, and that's when it just started coming together. I was like, I got to go all in on this thing. I didn't know what that meant. Initially, I thought just incorporate it into e-commerce because I was like, dude, first of all, it automates customer service.
Mhm.
And I thought all the other stuff, but I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to be doing something in this arena, in this field.
Mm.
So that's kind of my start. Oh, put a few YouTube videos out there. They started getting traction, and I really just enjoyed it because I was able to learn about it. Like I just sat there and read all the papers that the people put out, Microsoft and OpenAI, and well, OpenAI didn't have as many papers, but all the other companies.
Mm.
Just sat there reading it, highlighting it, and then posting the results on YouTube, and people liked it. And I was like, I'm getting paid to learn this stuff. And that was just like a dream come true.
Let's start with the genesis of
Yeah. Oh boy. Oh yeah. Yeah. This is, I'm so happy that the most controversial thing about my channel is, the faces that I make in the thumbnails. So I think for a lot of people, what maybe not is obvious on the surface is if you think about how YouTube is built, it's very different from the other platforms in that most of the other social platforms, the algorithm serves you the content. So on Twitter, it shows you the content. On, Instagram, it shows you the content. On YouTube, it
Mhm.
doesn't. It shows you whatever the creator chose to wrap it in, the thumbnail and the title. And so in order for people to see the content, that has to be killer. It has to have a high click-through rate. It has to have, well, yeah, I mean, for that, it's mainly the
Mm.
click-through rate. And then once they click on the content, they have to stick. So people sometimes say like you click and stick. So you click on the content, you stick with or you click on the thumbnail, you stick with the content. And now there's more and more tools. So now we're allowed to upload 3 different images, and whichever has the highest combination of click-through rate plus viewability, that's the one that's
Mhm.
shown. So a lot of people, they'll look at my video feed. It's always like that face, right? And they're like, why do you use the same thumbnail in every single one of these images?
Because it tests well. You guys keep clicking on it.
And
exactly.
that's why I always tell, I'm like, it's not true. I always test 3 different ones, and like my goal is to find one that beats it. But all of the collective
Mhm.
all the people watching it, you always click on that face for some reason. So, don't blame me. You guys
You
click
know,
on
the
it.
game's the game, and I would lean
Yeah.
into it. Never change, because now if you change, people are gonna be like, "Oh, what
That's
what
right.
happened to the old thumbnails? This
They
guy's
Don't hate
selling
the
us out."
player.
Yeah, like
It's the name.
our video that helped kind of get us going was we did a video on OpenAI has no moat, and then I ran it, and then I said, "Hey, you know what? I'll clip this into like 10 minutes." And I was too lazy to do a thumbnail, and it showed my old background in my shed, which people think it's messy, which it isn't. It's very clean. I think so. And I had my hands up like this, and I was like, "Oh, whatever." And that was one of our biggest videos of all.
Right. Right.
No,
Yep.
yeah. So no, I hear you on that. No, awesome.
I
So
want to
God,
know how you thought when you first played with ChatGPT, because I'm sure that's a lot of people must have had that same experience, but I'm curious what went through your mind.
Yeah. I mean, ChatGPT was good, and you definitely felt that there was something there. It wasn't quite mind blowing. To me, what really like hammered it in is when GPT-4 came out. Microsoft released the proto. It said it was like a proto AGI. GPT-4 was proto AGI, as they called it.
The
Um,
Sparks of AGI paper.
Sparks of the AGI paper, yeah. And that's where it just became really obvious to me. It's hard to explain, but basically, sometimes you give GPT 3.5 a certain prompt and you get that it kind of gets what needs to be said, but it doesn't really thinking about it too deeply. GPT-4, you can see a much deeper like
Mhm.
process, a deeper understanding. Like in the Sparks of AGI paper, one of them was like, write a letter from Gandhi recommending a presidential candidate for the U.S. for U.S.
Mm.
president, and that candidate is a subatomic particle, proton, a subatomic particle, right? So you're like, what does that even mean? You have to kind of stop and think about
Mhm.
what would Gandhi say about that. Like none of it really makes sense on the surface. And so GPT-3 is kind of like a kid that didn't do the homework, but kind of knows what needs to be said. He's like, oh,
Mhm.
George Washington was a great president. I'm so proud of him. He was great, blah, blah, blah. And then GPT-4 kind of really breaks it down and really captures these abstract concepts and is able to articulate it. And you're like, okay, so we just jumped from like a kid that knows how to speak English, that didn't do his homework, but kind of knows what needs to be said, to something that's more advanced. And so I was like, all right, so just project this forward. This seems like if this keeps going, keeps improving, we're going to see some wild stuff. So that was my ChatGPT moment, really,
Yep.
is just side by side comparing 3.5 and 4.
Interesting. And you were reading all these papers. I don't know about all academic background and your experience reading other fields of science, but these papers are pretty damn obscure. I mean, there's a lot of whacked out notation and mixtures of statistics and computer science. How did you like what? It must have been something about it that was compelling enough for you to slog through all this stuff.
I don't know because I haven't had. Well, I guess in the past I was interested in like the various workouts. So I follow Dr. Mike and how he talks about stuff. So
Mhm.
in the fitness community, they'll do some deep dive into the study about how creatine supplementation helps muscle contraction.
Right.
So I've done that a little bit, listening to people on YouTube go over various studies in the fitness community, muscle growth, stuff like that. So something about that, I say like, oh, it's like this ADHD thing where you're like uninterested in 99% of the things in the world, and then like the one thing that triggers some dopamine response, you're just like obsessed with it. So I
Mhm.
got obsessed with it, and I can't do that for anything else. It's only what my brain like really latches onto, but that thing I can
Mm.
stick with. So I would not be in the past. I did it with like various fitness research or like
Mhm.
health and fitness stuff like that. Now it's switched to AI, machine learning, but I could not do that for anything else that I wasn't like really super focused on. And I was just trying to understand these concepts because I feel like it just felt so wild, and I kind of wanted to also get your guys' take on some of this stuff because some of the concepts behind machine learning and neural nets and stuff like that, it just seems so wild and so different. Like we've discovered something that's fairly is so new in life. Like for example, the fact that in all the science fiction, I'm sure we've all read science fiction books in the
Mhm.
past.
Mhm.
Isaac Asimov, laws of robotics, Star Trek, etc. all of them describe artificial intelligence as something that humans engineered, something that they've invented and meticulously crafted. So they describe it, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
now it's almost seems like, and let me know if you guys agree with this, it doesn't really seem like we're building it as much as we're growing it. Like we're
Mm.
creating an environment, it's like almost like bacteria petri dish. Like if we create the
Yeah.
right environment, they multiply. We're not
Yeah.
inventing it or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, well, I would say we're not at the detailed level, we're not designing it. It's not like the way you would design a car.
Right.
You're not making sure all the parts fit together the right way and so on. It's more like you're growing a garden. You sort of set up the environment to be right,
Mhm.
put the seeds in, and then hope that everything works out. And when you come back, it's going to be a good garden, right? And it's going to
Yep.
produce whatever vegetables you planted. I feel like that's more of the analogy when I see these experiments. Um, I also think, to your point, it's fascinating how we started out with such tentative results, like so small and weak, and it was barely working. And then we kind of climbed this hill where every paper it just got a little better. And to your point about first seeing GPT-3, 5, and then 4, you're like, okay, each paper, it seems like they're making substantial progress. This thing is getting a little more respectable, a little more capable. And then they started kind of, in my mind, kind of cutting out the supports. Like, we're going to get rid of all these human examples and we're just
Yep.
going to have this thing do self-play and learn on its own. So now the environment you set up to train became even more important. And the amount of effort you put into directly designing it became relatively less.
Yeah. And it seems like when they cut out the human data, that's when it really takes off and something just next level begins to happen. And we're seeing that. I mean, DeepMind's publishing about it. DeepSeek R10 was an incredible read because that's exactly like, okay, what happens if we cut out the human data?
Mhm.
And like DeepMind, they put out a paper recently saying supervised fine tuning is memorization. Reinforcement
Mhm.
learning is generalization. So when
Yep.
we give it human data, it learns to parrot us, and it's good. It's like as good as the best humans. Like AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol. It was as good as a world champion. Then
Mhm.
the next level, when we do self play and all that stuff, all of a sudden that one beats the model that beat Lee Sedol like 100% of the time.
The one that learned bad habits from all those human games.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it seems like we're replicating that exact thing
Mhm.
with large language models now. And it's like, that's the next big wave. And I'm very excited about it, a little bit scared too, because it seems like the interpretability loses a little bit when we go
Mm.
scale up reinforcement learning, because we don't get what's happening as well.
I
So,
think we're like totally lost on interpretability. You know, we have so little idea. This goes back to where you started with, we're not really designing these things. And the flip side of that is even after they've grown or developed or however you frame it, we can't really understand how they work. Even when they're right in front of us, it's like, imagine having, I don't know, some complex machine standing right in front of you and you've got a bunch of engineers and you're like, have you taken this thing apart and figured out how it works inside? And they're like, we took it apart. We put it back together again. We still don't know how it works.
yep,
What the hell?
yep,
Imagine you were working at Microsoft right now. You're like one of the senior, principal engineers, whatever. And you're responsible for getting OpenAI's models to work in your data centers. And then the CEO is like, okay, do you understand how they work now? Can we start building our own and quit having to pay these guys? No, we still don't understand how they actually work. Best
Yeah.
we can do is train a small one ourselves.
yeah. It's so new because of any other technology, there's some engineer somewhere in the world, alive or dead, that at some point knew how to make it, how to create it, how it works. Nothing was where just no human being ever knew exactly what went into it. And this is kind of different where it's like, we don't really know what's happening. And, Dario Amodei recently in Anthropic, they posted a paper where he's saying that they're making some strides in terms of interpretability and understanding what neurons and clusters of neurons do
Mhm.
what. And
Mhm.
they've posted some fascinating research about that. But he's saying like, yeah, he believes in 5 years we'll have, made some great progress into understanding this stuff. But he's like, at the rate at which AI progress is going, that's going to be way too late. So it's like, yeah, we're making some progress, but not nearly fast enough. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think there's like three classes of folks right now that are getting most of the media attention: doomers, deniers, and dreamers. And so you have the doomers, who are the AI alignment folks: Helen Toner, Daniel King, whatever his last name was, who's on.
Joe,
good.
Yeah, thank you. It just flows off the tongue. Then you have Jan
like
Blakey,
Thibodeau.
or like Thibodeau, right? And there's people say, oh, you're saying AI alignment people are doomers, but there's, to distinguish it, there's the AI preparedness teams at OpenAI who do real work, who make it so that people can't go on there and try to get this model to catfish kids, groom people, or play along with suicidal thoughts and things like that. So that's valid red teaming no one's against. But then you have the AI alignment people who are thinking about, in 15, 20 years now, what will these systems be? And so let's focus on that cluster of our assumptions and then try to figure out a way to confuse everyone with a modern system that can't do a regular task by itself for a decent amount of time without self-destructing. So for our show, what we've been focusing on is how do we be pragmatic here about the AI systems we have today? And then also, when Joe and I are working at Google, when you're inside these companies, you can't just get on the mic and just start talking about tech, because that will violate your NDA, you're getting in trouble. So instead, you get to see Lex Friedman and other people who've never been inside the corporate operation or been close to how decisions are made, just pontificate on crap. And so our show's very like, let's cut away from the bullshit. And so you have the doomers here, and then you also have the deniers, who are folks who are just, no matter what, this tech sucks. It's not going anywhere. I don't want to use it, blah, blah, blah. I remember when ChatGPT had its moment and I was over at Salesforce, the current VP of AI was like, these LLMs are overrated. And it was an internal Slack message. These are overrated. And, our methods that we're using are probably better, and blah, blah, blah. And then with like a few weeks, Mark Benioff had a talk with him, and all of a sudden he magically got the religion and said, oh, no, actually ChatGPT is pretty good, and blah, blah, blah. And then you have like the Young LeCun types who, brilliant, did a lot of great things for back propagations, super smart dude, but he has a view on where he thinks AI should be going in his JEPA thing and whatnot, but does not have the political understanding of, hey, right now it's LLM's moments. They're getting attention. This is the first time that AI has been put in the hands of the laity, the peasants who don't know how to code, who can actually get it to do stuff like write copy for us or help us with stuff. And let's recognize that and celebrate that. But he's more focused on, yes, this is an AGI. And people are like, who cares? All I know is I now can use these things to help me with 15, 20% of my work today. So an 8-hour workday might go down to a 6-hour workday so that I can go home and be with my kids or do things like that. So you got that camp. And then the last one is the dreamers, who are focusing on AGI tomorrow. And so those are a lot of the folks. You had people who are in OpenAI who also are alignment folks who are true believers in AI to the point of they believe that they have a messianic zeal that what they're doing is going to lead to AGI and a computer that can think consciously and help us evolve and whatnot. And you had to have that belief back in the day if you're going to say, I'm leaving Google, where I'm an AI researcher getting paid millions, to go join this OpenAI company and go work on AGI. Like a lot of them were getting laughed at. There's a book called True Believer. It talks about people who think that the current world that we have right now is flawed, and the only way for us to improve upon ourselves is push for a social mission or change that will get us to the promised land. And so I call them AI True Believers. And those are great people. They're right that these LLMs are going to scale up, but then they start getting on the wacky sauce and start thinking, they're going to get the nuke codes and they're going to destroy everything. And it's like, hold on, time out. Have you talked to anyone who actually worked in missile silos? My uncle actually worked in missile silos, and all of those things were all mechanical. And you actually had a person who was on the other side of the wall with a little gun sight, so that person didn't pull a trigger to fire nukes. He'd have pulled a gun and say, you shoot, you die. So I didn't know any governments that were going to say, hey, let's connect these LLMs that hallucinate sometimes to launch the nukes.
Yeah.
So our show's been trying to be like, hey, pro AI, but at the same time, these AGI people are smoking too much crack, and these doomers are getting a little bit out of hand, and these deniers need to kind of get on the train and say, hey, these LLMs are actually doing something.
Yep.
So That's kind of my thoughts on things. Wes, Joe, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Doomers, deniers, and dreamers.
Yeah, I mean, this everything you said, and I 100% on board with everything. So, AI doomers, again, a lot of them are very, very smart people, and a
Hmm.
lot of the arguments they present are rooted in knowledge of the research into AI, and so when they talk about kind of like concrete examples of problems that they see and why it's so difficult, they seem very like they know what they're talking. They seem like I agree with a lot of the stuff that they say.
Hmm.
Like, yes, these are difficult problems. Yes, we have not solved these problems. And they're like, therefore, we're all going to die in 5 years. I'm like, okay, like that leap, like you lost me. That's where you lost me.
Oh, anytime I hear people say PDoom score, I
Right.
instantly check out mentally. I just,
Yeah.
oh, my PDoom score is 20, 30%. Based on what?
Right.
And then why was it 15% to 20%? Like changes. There's a book called Super Forecasters, which goes into the best forecasters in the world and how they actually
Count
make
on.
those. Exactly. And a lot of time people are just with their fingers in the air and 25%, 20. And the reason why I take offense to it is when you're in the corporate setting and you're actually trying to get things done and move things forward, you get these people playing this devil's advocate game of, I am just going to put the red flag up and prevent any technology from being launched to the detriment of the
Right.
org because of my own insecurities mentally.
Mhm.
We saw that with Blake Lemon when he got freaked out with Lambda. Like everyone laughs
Right.
now. It's like he saw Lambda back in 2020 and he was also a test engineer, and everyone at Google explained to you how this thing worked, but he thought it was conscious. There's something here, it's working. We
Yeah.
look at Trivial
Get
now,
out.
but in the day, those people can make those arguments that just completely derail your company. But sorry, Wes, I took over.
Oh
Continue. Go
no.
for it.
Yeah, that model, that was like GPT-2 level, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Roughly.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I could, I mean, still some people kind of, I think, believe that, but it's, I guess, more understandable now because it's so much more lifelike, especially if the voice mode. I tried the Sesame AI and wow, it feels very realistic, very lifelike.
Mhm.
Surprise. Yeah, it's hard to tell what's real, what's not, just
Yep.
based on interacting with it. Let's see. So yeah, so AI doomers, again, I have some respect for their sort of thought process, but the conclusions I just can't get on board with. Like that leap to everybody dies, it just doesn't make really sense to me.
Mm.
Deniers, yes. So a lot of people, it's strange to me how many people are denying the progress. Jan LeCun or LeCun, however they pronounce that. I watched his recent talk where he describes JEPA. So his kind of
Mhm.
approach to it definitely sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Sounds more like what we do because we're not thinking in terms of words in, words out, right? So we have certain
Mm.
encoded abstract concepts and we can learn about them through words or images or sound or whatever. And
Mhm.
so we can all think of what a dog is. We might have all kind of a different representation, but we can all kind of like say what it is, describe. We can draw it. We can make a sound like whatever. But the point is like, it's not like the same tokens in or out. There's some sort of an abstract representation. And I think that's what JEPA is, as far as I can understand. It certainly makes sense to me, but why the hate against LLMs? I don't get that. I think it seems to be working okay. Like you said, it's the LLM moment. Let's kind of figure out how far this thing can take us. But I guess it's good that he's maybe thinking ahead because 10 years from now we might be saying, well, good thing somebody was working
Mm.
on that. But yeah. Um, but the people that are saying that it's not going to progress past this is a little bit weird to me because what I'm seeing is we saw massive progress with 2016 back then, like AlphaGo to AlphaZero, that whole idea of self evolution, self play. And
Mhm.
then now we seem to be right. So we had superhuman AI that was superhuman at narrow tasks. And then we got this LLMs that's a little bit more general, right? It's not superhuman really, but it's generally quote unquote intelligent. It's able to, whatever you throw at, it'll attempt to do it. It'll be like, I'll try this, I'll try that. Sometimes it'll do well, sometimes it'll do great. And now I think those two sort of different AI uh, technology trees or whatever, they're kind of converging in that we're taking the stuff that we've learned from AlphaGo, AlphaZero, we're
Mhm.
applying it to LLMs.
Yep.
And this is where, and actually one of the people at OpenAI, they did a talk at the Sequoia Capital AI Summit recently, saying that the next big wave is going to be how we had throwing compute at pre-training, then, so we have test time compute or
Training time,
train
test time.
train time compute, test time compute. The next big wave is RL compute. So throwing
Mm.
tons of compute at those reinforcement learning environments. And then NVIDIA is doing the same thing with their Isaac Gym training robots and simulation. But I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, if they're able to scale up reinforcement learning on these large language models to do coding where it teaches itself, which they're beginning to do that, and it's showing promising things, and they're able to scale that up. That
Mhm.
seems like at that point, I feel like we're going to see some incredible progress really, really fast.
Mhm.
Or
You
we
think
find,
coding is the big use case that'll unlock a bunch of other things?
yeah, well, so I just on my channel just covered a video. I forget where it's from. I think there's a few Chinese researchers and in collab with US researchers. But what they did is they create exactly that. So they're like, how do we do, it's called absolute reasoner. So how do we train these AI models? We get the base model. How do we train them to do coding without any
Mhm.
human data, with no supervised fine tuning, all RL? And so what they did was they created two models, and one is the proposer, and it proposes various
Mhm.
questions and problems, et cetera. And then they have the student, or they call it the solver, I guess, and it solves all the problems. And I was looking at that paper; it looks really smart. They really captured something. How do you have it self play? So you have the
Mhm.
teacher and yeah. So and it seems like it has good results. So if they're able to take that, apply it to bigger models, scale up reinforcement learning, it seems like they might get these models to be able to be incredible coders, because it seems to, like, that approach, it generalizes. It doesn't
Mhm.
just memorize how to do problem X or problem Y. It's sort of like, okay, so I've seen these problems here, and I can now solve all of these problems I haven't seen before. So it generalizes to the unseen data.
Mhm.
If that works within the next couple of years, I feel like we're going to see a pretty rapid takeoff in coding. And if we don't,
Mm.
maybe there'll be a bit of a, I don't know, AI winter or something where it kind of just, you know what I mean? So I don't
Yeah.
know.
Happened before a couple times.
Yeah, yeah.
Joe, go for it.
So I think the absolute zero paper was gangbusters, and it's funny because it's a long line of these things, right? There's I don't know when it was, like the '60s when Samuels built the checkers player that self played until it could beat anyone at checkers, and then there was Tesoro and the backgammon player that did the same thing. Then there was the Deep Blue team doing chess, and then we have AlphaGo doing Go because that was
Mhm.
considered unsolvable because it's such a large board, so many combinations of moves. And then Silver and his team decide, what if we didn't train it on any human data? We make it only learn through self play, and you get Alpha Zero and Alpha Zero Mu, and the same engine can play chess, Go, and shogi, I think.
Yeah.
Um, that's crazy, and it becomes superhuman in play at all three games, the same architecture, right? And then these absolute zero guys are like, as you described, we'll do this proposer and this solver, and we'll try and get more and more difficult coding challenges to be proposed. And then the solver will get better and better at solving more and more difficult problems. And then we'll just run another round of RL on those training examples. And now the proposer is smarter, and so he proposes even more difficult problems. And now we're just going to eat our own tail in a loop until this thing breaks out of a glass ceiling, and flies around the city or some Willy Wonka shit.
Right.
Anyway, my point is that that algorithm and that self-reinforcing nature, that's gangbusters. And it's proven to be gangbusters before. The question I had, and probably you thought the same thing when you're looking at the papers, how will you apply this to real world problems? Like if you understand how to do it in a game, a two-player game, total information on the board, rules are really simple. I see how you built a self-play, and I can even probably design one myself if I had to. But how to do that on like math problems or reasoning in a legal case? I have no sense of how to set up a self-play game there until I saw two things in that paper. One is that they figured out how to do it for code.
Mhm.
Sort of makes sense because you can evaluate the code and know for sure if it ran or not, and you gave the right answer or not. But also, as they got their system better and better at coding, also became better at solving math problems.
Right.
And they weren't training it on math problems, only on coding. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Just getting better at coding makes this thing better at math? I wonder if it's getting better at generic reasoning. And I don't know the answer yet. I don't think they got into it in the paper, but that's a $64 million question.
Right.
Oh,
Getting
yeah.
that reward model correct, which ties into the Windsurf acquisition for OpenAI.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, people are generating code, and like I was doing, so I got into ChatGPT because at Google I was in HR, which is like the proletariat, the company, working in M&A. Listen, anytime I want to get those bougie Joe people to come through and code something, oh, I can't, I'm busy. And so I built an app script to help just automate certain processes. And it took me like 6 months to learn app script. It was just painful. And I went to ChatGPT and I basically was able to do the same script in about like 30 seconds. And I was just like, oh my God. But what I was doing before was I would copy code from ChatGPT, then put it into an IDE, play it, see if it works, and give the error process. And a lot of people were doing that manually. But the issue is for OpenAI is they're not seeing what works for me, and they're not getting that into their training data. And so when they acquired Windsurf, they can actually now say, okay, what developers are using this code that we're committing,
Yeah.
which is not working, so they can get a reward signal from that, and then help train their models, make it even better. And I think it's always that's a missing aspect. That's why when I see a lot of channels talking about like AGI tomorrow, it's going to take over all project planning and things like that. It's like, okay, how do you get a reward model to train an LLM? Okay, our original goals for this long-term project were X, but the reality changes and we're going to Y. Actually, CEO just came in and saying there's different politics, so we're going to Z. Like those things are some things that we haven't gotten to yet. And so that's why I think I try to narrowly focus on like what can we get done today? Like for instance, the Klarna CEO was coming out a year and a half ago and was saying, yeah, we don't use Workday anymore and we don't use Salesforce. And I was like, bullshit, because you're gonna, and what are we gonna replace it with? An AI agent, just like that Ahmad guy from, was it Stability AI? He like his eyes when you watch him talk, it's like the engine on, but no one's behind the wheel. It's like what's going on there? And someone told him, like, yeah, Workday, it's gonna get replaced by an AI agent. And I'm like, hold on, time out. Do you think any employee is going to be happy when that AI agent hallucinates 70% of the time and doesn't give them the right pay? Like, do you know how furious people are going to be in that situation? And do you also know that Workday is just not, it's a system of record for also Sarbanes-Oxley and other SOX compliance. So your company doesn't get sued by the federal government. So we just had a news update today that Klarna CEO, Klarna came out again today and basically was like, yeah, actually, we're going to start hiring humans again. And we basically overstated the fact that we didn't just deprecate Workday and Salesforce. We actually just went to different vendors in the first place. So I think one issue we deal with too in this space is just the hype gets ahead of ourselves and a lot of different hype merchants. And I think what we and Joe try to talk about is motivated reasoning for a lot of these folks. Like the people who are running AI labs, you want to hype it so that you get funding for your next round. You get top AI researchers, and you want people to make them think that you have secret sauce, whether we have AGI actually, and you're only going to get access to it if you come work with us. And so they hype it there. So that's their interest. And that gets people into a fervor because they now think, oh, all engineers are going to be replaced by tomorrow. All jobs are gone. But then the problem is when they play with that fire too much, then they wake up regulators. Like in California, we had California almost pass a bill last year that was going to say, hey, we need third-party verification to release any AI models. So a third-party vendor would have to come in, look at your coding stack, and if they raised any red flag, you would have to jump through the hoops. Now, what if we get some person that believes in the, I forgot what the fallacy is called here. I have my notes here. Sorry. Hold, please. Do the perfect solution fallacy, which AI alignment people believe in, that before you launch any system, there's a way to know every possible externality, what could go wrong. And anyone who's ever had either taken care of your parents or raised a kid knows that's impossible. You just can't do that. But what if one of that person's behind the wheel and says, we're not going to allow you to launch any of these systems anymore? Then we're going to start seeing the AI miracle slow down in its ability to actually get new tech in the hands of people.
Chinese are going to get a pull ahead of
Chinese
that.
are going to destroy us. So actually, Joe, that's actually a good segue. What's going on with this whole jingoism that's going on now? That like all
I
of a
want
sudden Silicon Valley was peace and doves, and now we want to go war.
I wanted to ask you guys about that. Yeah, what is happening with that? Because everybody's changing. DeepMind, Dario, like they're all now kind of against China. Not against it, but they're like, be scared of China. We need to be protected. What's happening?
Yeah, and also we want to answer that. We also want to talk about this whole talk about Google is supposed to crush OpenAI. Couldn't get into that either.
Mhm.
Then we want to talk about benchmark saturation. We also want to get into
Oh, yeah.
the guilds and how they get mad. But if you want to learn about that, first you got to do is like and subscribe Wes's video, and then click this button for part 2. Okay, so we are now in part 2. We are joined here by the one, the only Wes Roth. Wes, thank you for joining us here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Super appreciate it. If you didn't see part 1, go ahead and click here. I'm doing this right now because I hate doing post-production editing. So, Joe, Wes had a wonderful question. Like, what's going on with this jingoism in the Silicon Valley? Like, we were doves 5 minutes ago, and now we're like, we gotta get the
Yeah,
Chinese.
we're
with the
very
nuke us.
we're very hawkish all of a sudden.
Yeah, the Red Scare.
It's kind of, yeah, it's interesting. I think in some cases, Jordan, it goes back to your description of motivated reasoning. I can imagine if the CEO of Anthropic, Dario, goes to answer questions and says, "Hey, we should prevent China from just having unfair advantages and getting ahead of us." That sounds reasonable. Okay, what do you have in mind, Dario? Well, for example, we shouldn't ship them the latest chips from NVIDIA. That's not an unfair advantage. That's like a level playing field. Why shouldn't Chinese companies get NVIDIA chips? Well, because they might get to AGI ahead of us. And you have to understand that whoever gets a slight lead and manages to achieve AGI or ASI first, then it will be a takeoff, like a runaway, where nobody else has a chance to catch up. And even a month or two of being ahead in that manner would be just a huge change to the economy, politics, military posture. Everything would suddenly shift. And so we can't allow that to happen where we're behind them. So first of all, that's complete catastrophizing. It's not at all obvious that them getting a little ahead means all these things suddenly happen and it's irreversible. Second, it's not really clear that having China get to AGI first is worse for humanity than having the United States get there first. I'm not really 100% sure that I could claim that, but let's say I believe that. Third, why am I punishing NVIDIA specifically? They're just one layer in this technology stack. There's a whole bunch of other pieces involved. Fourth, to Wes's point earlier about reading all these papers, we were blithely publishing all kinds of fascinating scientific advances in machine learning right up until just the last couple months when it suddenly became a huge commercial race in the United States. It wasn't until we saw how wildly successful ChatGPT was that suddenly OpenAI is a completely closed shop. And Google itself published the Transformer paper to the whole world,
Right.
not knowing what it meant yet. You know, they had it. The people who worked on it knew that it was something, but the people at Google didn't stop them from publishing. If we really believe that this is a national priority, like us versus China, toe to toe in nuclear warfare, whatever the crazy Dr. Strangelove thing you want to, describe or frame, we should have never been publishing that research, not just refusing to ship them the latest GPUs. So I'm completely confused by all these things at once. And to your question, Wes, it's pretty awkward for me to hear someone in charge of a foundation lab say that they don't want China to get GPUs, for example, when those foundation labs hire huge numbers of Chinese graduate students who are Chinese nationals, and they're producing more than half of all the researchers in the world, that one country. Like if that's our national priority, why are we taking them into American schools and educating them? Like we have all kinds of conflicts in this.
Right.
And then if I just focus on Anthropic or OpenAI, then my reaction is, oh, you're clearly talking your book. It's in your interest for some Chinese lab not to undercut you the way that DeepSeek did, for example.
I totally agree. And one thing about the awesome Chinese expats we get here who are through all these great AI research labs, who are working super hard, and they're great. They eventually get their green cards and they stay here in America. It's fantastic. If we're going to say, let's hold back GPUs, China can then say, hey, we're going to hold back those researchers because we have DeepSeek now. We have Huawei who needs them. We also have Alibaba who needs them, the company who made Qwen 3. And then, you can have your GPUs. We're going to have our research scientists. And another point about export controls, we've been harping on how they've failed. In the 90s, we were afraid of China creating their own supercomputers because of with CPU use, and we blocked them, and then China caught up. And then now, Huawei just came out again saying we're coming out with chips that are as good as A100.
Oh, you skipped the part where we blocked them from buying communications equipment.
Go for that, Joe.
Mostly from Cisco. And they made sure that they funded hundreds of companies, and Huawei emerged as a powerhouse, building probably better hardware than Cisco and certainly much cheaper.
You know what? Next time we go barbecue, it's on me, Joe. That was a good point. So we created Huawei through our own export controls mistakes, and here we are now. So that's bad. Now, we also harp about motivated reasoning is because on the All In podcast, you'll see Chamath and David Sachs circle jerk about export controls and how great they are. But Chamath doesn't explain what companies he invested in. Oh, Grok.
That's right. Grok.
That's right. And they're an NVIDIA competitor. That's right.
Knew
And
there was something.
I knew there was something going on. Now, what if he went to Chamath and said, also, I think there should be export controls on Grok's GPUs? Stop the count,
Right.
That's why also,
Totally unfair.
totally unfair. So there's a gentleman named Eric Schmidt. You might have heard about him.
God.
And
Yeah.
so he wrote that paper with Alexander Wang trying to compare GPU or trying to compare AI to nuclear war. That's a slap in the face of JFK. JFK had a 13-day missile crisis where it was like basically a butterfly dick length. We were away from going nuclear war. It was for JFK, RFK, and Khrushchev telling the hawks in their administrations, "Oh, it's time. Let's calm things down a bit." Country annihilated. So anytime I hear people comparing AI and nuclear war, I'm just like, Jesus. So of course he does that, but then he fails to mention that he has multiple startups he's funding right now that would benefit from the government believing the garbage he's talking about, so they can get more Department of Defense contracts. Then Alexander Wang, who Scale AI, they've been focusing on labeling data for these AI labs. Even Google uses them. Well, Joe was showing me in Qwen 3 and other research papers, now they're saying, hey, LLMs generate synthetic data, and now sometimes they're labeling their own data, and now they're also cleaning their own data sets. So,
Or the absolute zero approach that Wes was describing.
Right. So, do we really need Scale AI? So what does Scale AI do? Now they're trying to become a Department of Defense contractor, and they've scored a contract for $250 million. And so they want to push this AGI, go against the CCP. They're going to destroy us. It's them or us.
Right.
So motivated reasoning is something that we all have to be aware of and do our due diligence on these people. Because if you go on CNBC, anytime an analyst talks about any stock, they show a screen saying this person has a position to either buy the stock or
Right.
sell the stock. Yet we don't do that for venture capitalists, and we don't do this for people who are doing these committees and talking about how bad AI is.
So we just raised at least 10 points. Wes, what do you think of this whole mess?
Oh yeah, this is huge. And so this is one of the things that I do want to learn more about, because you guys know tons about like the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, all the shenanigans and what everybody's investing in, stuff
Inside
like that.
baseball.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, yeah, Chamath has, I think, one of the early investors in Grok. Grok obviously is doing very well from what I hear. It's an incredible chip. And yeah, so obviously if they can like shut down NVIDIA, that's only good for his company. So he's talking this book, saying Eric Schmidt. Yeah, Alexander Wang was at that Davos meetup where you were saying how DeepSeek has tons of NVIDIA chips that they're not supposed to have. Later, it turns out that was not the case. It was like a case of broken telephone. Because the guy from Semi Analysis, I guess, said one thing, then Alexander Wang took it to mean something else, then goes on television and says,
Go deeper into that, because one thing I talk about, Joe, is called the Dick Cheney effect. It was master. I didn't support the Iraq War, but I support the troops. But it was masterful. Dick Cheney did. He first wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying like, we got they have yellow cake and blah 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 blah. Then he wanted to meet the press, and he was like, in the New York Times reported that they had yellow cake and blah blah blah. And so he created his own echo chamber, and then people just went with the story. And you're seeing these
Mm.
AI labs do it too. Can you break down the whole Alexander Wang telephone issue, please, again?
Yeah, so the guy at Semi Analysis posts great stuff very often, either just posts great analysis or leaks some information to hold. There is no moat memo out of Google back in the days.
Mhm.
I think they first published it. So definitely, and they know they have a deep view into the industry. So I guess I don't remember the exact details, but he said, okay, yeah, DeepSeek must have had their hands on the following chips, which was, I think, still okay. Like it didn't necessarily mean that they broke any export controls or anything like that. But
Mhm.
I guess Alexander Wang either misunderstood that either intentionally or or on purpose. Then at the Davos meetup, he goes on CNBC or whatever it was and goes, "Yes, DeepSeek has all these NVIDIA chips that they're not supposed to have. That's why they're able to build this thing." That's if I recall correctly,
Mhm.
that's what
Mhm.
happened, and that sort of kind of definitely
And that's the very gentle version compared to like what's his name, Lucky Palmer,
right.
the
Palmer looking, yeah.
gambler guy, Palmer Lucky.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, his version was much more red meat.
What did
Oh,
he
he
say,
was just
Mister?
oh, DeepSeek, what's really going on is the hedge fund has actually put massive short positions on the U.S. market that
Mhm.
released this to then capitalize on the Magnificent Seven losing money, which is just
Yeah.
the communists trying to destroy capitalism.
That's what
He
he
was
called
in
it
that
a
part, but
psyop.
yeah, it's a
Psyop.
psyop.
That's right. Do you think they took out short positions? I mean, they do have, but the thing is, I think everybody was they were probably as surprised as everybody else. I don't
They
think
were
they,
baffled.
yeah,
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they released this model they had it out for a while, and no one like really cared. They saw the research was out for a while, no one really cared. And
Well,
then,
and the negative reaction against the large cap tech companies was really misapprehending what the research meant. You know, it was like an overreaction and kind of unrelated because you still needed to train a very large traditional model. And then you could do a little bit of training on top of that, RL training, to get it to be a reasoning model.
Mhm.
And then as a third step, you could take that large reasoning model that you'd now constructed and distill it into a much smaller model. But you still paid the price for the large original model. So it wasn't like all the training just evaporated, which would have been great if they'd discovered that. I'd be even happier. But that wasn't the case.
Mhm.
And they said so in the paper. They're like, well, you still have to train this damn original model to start with the hard way, with a lot of compute and a lot of samples. And that's why I got so excited. And I think Wes had the same reaction. When I saw the Absolute Zero paper, I was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now we actually see a potential route to not have to train that original massive model as the starting point.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think the DeepSeek. So they said whatever the number they said they built it for 6 million or whatever it was. That's what spooked a lot of people. But the
Yeah.
amount of money that they had to put into it, developing the infrastructure and everything else, in order to be able to release that model for 6 million, that's what I think everybody missed.
Mhm.
AI Explained is a channel on YouTube. He did
Mhm.
Philip, I think, is the guy behind it. So he did a great deep dive into the founder of DeepSeek. Seems like an absolutely fascinating person.
Mhm.
And a lot of the stuff that he talks about, like how he approaches benchmarks. He's like, I don't care about the benchmarks. We're not going to game the benchmarks. We're just going to focus on real world use cases and just
Here,
everything.
here.
Yeah. He
my
said,
man, amen.
and he's not playing the fundraising game. He's not playing the short term game. He's playing like the really long term game. And so I feel like, we're going to see a lot. We're going to see a lot of incredible things out of that team because I think they're just going to be on a roll, creating incredible tech, open sourcing it. And so I was wondering, I was going to ask you, so in terms of the people that are kind of afraid of China and kind of being a little bit more hawkish about China and stuff like that, while at the same time having companies that are sort of in competition with them, how big of a deal is the fact that a lot of these Chinese companies are open sourcing a lot of these models? Is that the big threat? Is that almost like they're
Mm.
afraid that they're going to lose their ability to raise capital and get paid for the
Mhm.
stuff that they
Mhm.
produce if DeepSeek just drops the best models and just like it's open source? Is that the
Yeah,
big
those
threat?
damn Chinese labs are joining Facebook and being open source. Who would have thought?
Yeah. Do you think that's one of the big things that they're afraid of is that the open source is just going to be undermining OpenAI and Anthropic and such?
I mean, it forces them to stay at the boundary, right? They have to stay a step ahead of whatever's being open sourced. Because certainly anything that does get open sourced is in a large way commoditized. I think that's true. And probably it's a little frustrating for the foundation labs. They do all this hard research work and then somebody reverse engineers it in their minds and then open sources it. I think Sam made this point. He was describing how difficult it is to develop something when you don't yet know if it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you see somebody else do it, even if it's proprietary and they don't tell you how they did it, now just the fact that you know it's possible and you have a rough idea for what direction they used, what approach they used, means that it's much easier for you to reproduce it. And he found that kind of annoying that he had a lot of fast followers behind him, right? But I think
Yeah.
to your point, this goes to the classic commoditizing the complement strategy that Microsoft was always taking. If somebody open sources a whole bunch of interesting stuff, they make it no longer be a competitive advantage for anybody else.
Very
Yep.
well
And then
said.
if they have something else that is their competitive advantage, they are relatively advantaged by this other pillar being removed.
Yeah, and that was the point that Balaji made. I'm not sure what you guys think about it. Yeah, so he's pretty big. He's in the crypto space. I think he's on Coinbase. One of
Wait,
the
wait, wait. Balaji's in crypto? I had no idea. I only watched that 7-hour-long brainwash. Lex Friedman, for Christ's sake. Jesus Christ. Just start your interview with, guys, I have a lot of bags in crypto
right.
right now. If you just go buy some crypto from me, I appreciate it. Then
That'd
I
be
can stop
great.
watching. Yeah.
But that was his point, kind of. I think that this is a way to maybe kind of undermine some of the U.S. foundational, like frontier AI labs, is by just making everything, all the AI open source, because China has an advantage of making physical things. So if they're able to kind of like take the teeth out of the software, the AI software, et cetera, on the U.S. side, they can still produce all the robots and all the trinkets and stuff like that. And he, if I recall correctly, it was almost saying that the Chinese government might be specifically funding those efforts. What do you think about that? Is it just a crazy idea, or do you think that might be a strategy that's being employed?
So I was in political science at Stanford University, and there's a professor called Professor Strover. And when you're in school, you're always like, why am I doing this? And then you get one professor in one class, you're like, okay, that was worth the price of admission. And so he asked us, okay, everyone, so why do we go into the Iraq War? And some person was like, oil. And so he put down oil. And, why? Saddam might have tried to kill Bush Sr. or something. Israel, U.S., risk of nuclear weapons. The fact that there is another dictator in the Middle East that we need to overthrow. And so he was like, you know what, you're all right in your own different directions. But actually, when you make a decision in business or in policy, you're kind of in the fog of war where you have all these little different reasons why you're doing something. And then we make a decision. It's easy for someone to go post hoc and say, oh, it was only because of this one element, and that's why we got here. It's usually a mixture of things. Like if I was a CCP, they would be crazy right now to say, you know what, let's not have an industrial policy that goes towards us building our own GPUs and AI, because there's probably no use for it in the future. It's like, no, you're going to put resources towards that. But then going back to Highflyer and the DeepSeek example, that dude, before he created his quant fund, was super into AI. Like he was a true believer, but eventually he's like, I got to make money somehow. I got to do quant funding.
Right.
My heart's not really into it. And then as time went on, hey, I'm making more money than God. I can now crusade like Zuckerberg. Well, before Zuckerberg, I can crusade into AI and start training models. So the government aspect of it, but then you also had people who are really interested in the science and technology. And then you also have tons of Chinese expats who are also into AI or coming to American labs. So you have all these things coming together leading to it. But Joe, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it too.
Yeah, I like that description. I think of those old pie charts about the PC software industry or the hardware industry, where they would show all the different vendors who made like hard drives and motherboards and cases and operating systems and apps and so on. And when you looked at it, there'd be like a huge wedge that was Intel because the CPU was so expensive. And there'd be another huge wedge that was Microsoft because you had to pay a fat amount of money for Windows and Office. And remember, these are the wedges for profit, right? These are the people who kept a lot of the money out of the sale of every PC. And then you had all the people who made motherboards and cases and hard drives and all these other hard to make components, but their margins were really thin. Even if their revenue was good, they didn't keep much.
Mm.
And I look at that and I think, okay, the same thing is happening to a lot of products in China or like say the modern auto industry, where they're looking at, the software they have to pay for in order for their product to work. And they're like, oh, software bastards keep fat margins, right? Like if they sell something for $1, they keep, 60 cents of it. Whereas we're over here just beating the hell out of each other, competing to make widgets. And if we sell something for $1, we're lucky if we keep a few pennies.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's your business, you immediately have to be thinking, how do I keep more of the money when I sell this product? And if the software guys are the ones who are collecting all the cash, your target's pretty obvious.
That's a really good point. And,
Yep.
we saw this too with just Facebook, how they created the Facebook phone, which everyone laughed at. And the big issue was I hate that I get squeezed to death by Apple. They control the stack and to play their goddamn games.
Mhm.
They decide to put on this privacy thing. Now I got to change the way I'm doing my ad targeting. And then you see OpenAI right now, that partnership with Johnny Ives to create some hardware device, which I think is fraught because I'm carrying a cell phone around. Now people have watches, and then you want me to carry a third device? Like this thing has to be pretty damn good to do that.
Mhm.
But the reason why OpenAI is doing it is because they want to control the whole entire hardware stack.
Mhm.
Like right now, Google's pushing Gemini down my throat 24/7, like Google Plus back in the day. And it's frustrating. But OpenAI wishes they had that so they wouldn't have to deal with Google's garbage. Then you had the Windsurf acquisition again. Like
Mhm.
in tech, especially on Twitter, we have a tech-centric view on how companies are run. We just think, oh, technology is the most important thing ever. And that's why companies are worth a lot of money. And Windsurf, oh, that's a VS Fork. I could have created that yesterday. It's like, well, one, why didn't you do it? And then second, if you could do it, then why aren't you selling it for like $2 or $3 billion? Oh, that's right, you can't. There's a lot of other factors going on into why businesses are successful. And another reason why OpenAI did this is because they wanted to actually be able to have the enterprise relationship, the developers are where they're committing code and have access and insight to that so they can get that information to build a better product.
Mhm.
And so it ties to what Joe is saying. Instead of being at behest of Windsurf or behest of Cursor, we want to be on the top of that stack and to have that relationship with the end customer and users so then we don't get squeezed in between. So
Give
Should-
Wes a crack at what he thinks of that deal.
yeah, go for it, Wes.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So they bought Windsurf for $3 billion. There's also Cursor valued at $9 billion. It looks like Google is building their own kind of a version of it, which is called the Firebase Studio, which I'm very
Mhm.
excited about. It's not quite there. It's still a little bit clunky. It still has issues, but it's got that. It's got the Gemini 2.5 Pro integration,
Mhm.
and then it has an ability to very easily publish that stuff online. So if you have an app, you can easily just publish it online. It gives you all the analytics, all that stuff, like few
Mm.
clicks. So I think it's making it brain dead simple to do that. So if they are able to get it to the same like level of quality as Cursor or Windsurf, I feel like that's going to be huge for them. And it's the same exact thing, right? So it's VS Code, a fork of VS Code plus a chatbot that's
Mhm.
sitting on the right
Mhm.
side panel. Um, so if I understand correctly, so is Google trying to build their own Cursor to get that flywheel going of users using it and building data? That's what's happening there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they're probably not going to be acquiring a Cursor or anything like that.
Oh, they probably would still consider it.
Consider
They
it.
just want to get in the game. This goes to, I think, to Jordan's earlier point about if you're building the models on the back end, you need to see how people are using them and which completions they're choosing and so on. That means you got to be in the middle of the whole process. You got to sort of own the stack, to use the Silicon Valley language. But Wes, is Firebase Studio online only, like in the browser only, or does it come packaged as a standalone app?
I haven't seen it. I just seen it online only.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any standalone. Yeah. So it's like a Google Colab. It's pretty good. I'm enjoying it. It's a little clunky, but I feel like if they polish it up, it would be amazing.
Isn't it kind of bizarre to have Microsoft create Visual Studio Code and open source it, And now there's a massive business competition around products that are based on their open source code base.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm glad they did it. Yeah. Yeah, what do you guys think about that? I mean, is that gonna, is that gonna help people create more open source stuff like this? Or is now companies are gonna be a little bit more careful to put that much value out there? Because I mean, Google's using it, right? If they end up spinning it out to something massive, obviously Microsoft would not want that.
And Windsurf just got acquired for $3 billion,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And Cursor is worth what, $9 billion in the last round?
Yeah.
That's a lot of very valuable companies, at least on the speculation side, all based on a code base and a product that Microsoft sort of built, promoted, encouraged all those developers, and then at some point kind of changed their mind, open sourced it, and kind of backed away from it, as far as I can tell. I don't really understand why Microsoft, and especially with GitHub, isn't right in the middle of this mix,
Right.
building a killer version of Visual Studio Code that's integrated with somebody's language models.
I mean, you think that GitHub had the first relationship with OpenAI, like they knew what this Copilot would be and what the possibilities were, and then they just couldn't execute on it. Now, Joe, you sent me a research paper called The Span of Control in Businesses, and I think this kind of ties to that. Maybe you can talk a little bit like high level about that.
It's all you, man.
Okay, so basically, there's a theory that there's companies that insource things, like a core thing that you're doing. Maybe you're a restaurant, you make hamburgers, and you make roasts and soups and things like that. But it gets to a certain point that there's only so many things you can do, and eventually you outsource certain things. So maybe you might get a pastry chef, or you're going to outsource towards a cleaning company to come in and clean your organization, your restaurant. Now the same thing applies to these tech companies. Eventually it's like you can be in so many different product areas, and you think that maybe you can just keep on hiring people to give you more ability to control different things. The problem is all these decisions end up falling on someone's desk at the end of the day of what are we going to pursue, what are we going to improve, and where the trade-off's going to be. And so people have been saying for the longest time, Google's going to crush OpenAI. It's going to happen. Well, it's been about 3 years now, and they still are nowhere near closer of crushing OpenAI. And I think the issue that people don't understand is a lot of these CEOs are so spread out. These big company CEOs are spread out in so many different areas. It's impossible for them to stay on top of all these other different decisions in industries. And it even happens in startups. Like Sam had a decision of saying, hey, I could pay $3 billion for Windsurf, or we could try to build something internally. But what's the opportunity cost of us going out there and spending my engineers' valuable time away from building the core ChatGPT product that's getting 500 million weekly visits? Or I could take this $40 billion that we have and just spend $3 billion of it and be half cash, half equity, and just get 80 people from Windsurf who've already dialed in and can control the market. And so bring this all back of where it's going on with Microsoft right now. I just think they have way too much stuff on their plate and they're not able to execute on these things. And that's what's hurting Google now too. But I'd love to hear what you two think.
So quick question about what's happening with Google. Because is it that, so there's sort of like Google proper, and then there's Google DeepMind, separate offices, separate cultures, separate management and people. And I think Gemini was called Gemini because of the twin kind of companies. I don't know if that's the case or not. Just it seemed like to me. How much of the recent Google success would you attribute to the fact that it seems like the development of all these AI models of LLMs is shifting from sort of the Bay Area Google to the more Demis Hassabis team? And is that what's happening or no?
No? I think it ties to Joe's point. Remember what you said about it's so much easier to be a fast follower to someone who's already created the breakthrough compared to creating the breakthrough yourself. So once OpenAI came out with ChatGPT, or take a step back, the reason why I, maybe Joe also, are so cynical towards these AI doomers and alignment people is that we've dealt with them internally inside corporations, and how they have hurt Google, who had the opportunity to actually take a lead in this race a very long time ago. They could have released Lambda and other things like that, but they had Blake Lemoine and all these other AI ethicists say, well, what if someone does a completion and it pisses off Bees and Alpha Centauri? well, if you can't do this, we're going to hurt people, and blah, 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 blah. And so you get stuck in like this endless circle jerk of getting into this whole completeness fallacy of trying to figure out every edge case. And I think that what the issue is for Google in this circumstance was that they got caught up in their own internal bureaucracy. But then once ChatGPT got released, it was like, uh-oh, this is a threat to our core business. And it gave Sundar an excuse to douche out of the system, all the garbage and all the trash. It didn't matter anymore. OpenAI did the same thing too with the board drama, rid of all the alignment people into Anthropic. Peter Thiel told Sam Altman years ago, I am not funding you anymore. I kicked him out of my program, and you need to get these EA people out of OpenAI now, or you're going to regret it. And Sam was like, oh, well, politics and things like that.
Yeah, he gave him a clear warning.
He warned them, yeah.
Right, exactly. So I see one is this, they finally had competition that like woke them up, was the main driver. But then as far as like, was it DeepMind and things moving over there, it's making things easier. I think it's more of Sundar just saying, hey, all these years I've been trying to make all these different teams happy with AI. I need to consolidate this under someone. Now, DeepMind decision to buy that company in 2014 was Larry's decision. And Larry specifically said, I want to keep this company in an island and I don't want Google proper to F with it. So let them do what they're doing and don't let our culture get in the way.
The way that YouTube worked.
Exactly. And then also people forget that Demis Hassabis was on This Week in Startups and they asked him, Jake Howe was like, oh, so like, when did you get bought by Google? And Demis said, to train more of these models, we needed more money. And it was the only way to do it was to get bought by a bigger company. Reminds you of OpenAI. Why did they take a gigantic paycheck or a gigantic investment check from Microsoft? Because they need capital to train more models.
SoftBank.
And now from SoftBank. So eventually they were their own thing. And for the longest time, they tried to get attention from Google proper on seeing if they could work together on things, and it was too difficult. And it was only until ChatGPT came through that eventually it opened the floodgates for them. But Joe, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this too.
Yeah, I think you described it well. I mean, in the earlier days, you could see papers from these companies that would have researchers from 2 or even 3 different companies, including Google and OpenAI. And now you just can't even imagine that.
Yeah, I used to see Google Brain or Google. Now you mostly see Google DeepMind as the only one, right?
Or you'd see a paper that people from Google Brain and people from OpenAI and
I see what
working
you're saying.
together on some project because it was a research project.
Right.
Now everything has an immediate commercial impact and everyone's become much more quiet about what they're doing.
Yeah, if like attention is all you need, if that paper didn't get published, I wonder where we would all be now, like how different everything would have looked.
Yeah.
I'm very curious because I'm so excited about some of the stuff that's coming out of Google DeepMind, Isomorphic Labs. I've been kind of following them. That's very interesting. Just everything. They have the known project that's building various, discovering new material. I mean, just everything out of there is just so fascinating. At the same time, so I feel like if Google DeepMind was its own standalone company, I would love to invest in it because it's connected to Google. I feel like Google's whole thing is, search ads, like one of the best business models ever, people clicking on search ads, like whatever billions of dollars they get for that. But doesn't it seem like there's this weird thing whereas AI is taking off, the search is going to start trending down while the revenues from AI is going to be going up? Like what happens to Google? Like, how do you even think about where Google's going to be in this environment?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Can they or will they make a pivot if it becomes necessary?
Right.
I mean, there was a period where Microsoft was sort of in the wilderness where, Windows was trending down and Microsoft hadn't really been successful outside of Windows and Office. And people kind of left them for dead. And then when Satya came in, it was like all of a sudden they started making a bunch of decisions that made sense, including the investment in OpenAI. And they got a new lease on life. Like suddenly it's a revitalized company. So it's possible to imagine a few things going right for Google and the same kind of what the press calls the redemption arc playing out.
Yeah, I wouldn't count them out. I think also there needs to be a new CEO. Joe and I do a prediction tracker on like what our predictions are for next year and whatnot, so we can keep ourselves accountable. I thought Sundar would be gone by the end of last year because he's been here for 7 or 8 years, which is like an eternity for tech CEOs. I think
Did
for
you
Google,
bet silver Trump coins on that?
no, I should have. Damn it! I know I missed out on that one.
That's our usual bet.
Exactly. Silver
coin.
Trump coins, the novelty factor gets hilarious. But I think Google would probably need a new executive to put them into wartime mode where they actually feel like, okay, now we're losing more market share in search. There was a recent kerfuffle in the news that during the DOJ trial that Google was dealing with for being potentially a monopoly, they had an executive from Apple speak and say, yeah,
Eddie Q.
Eddie Q, there you go. Once we installed, a lot of people using Perplexity and ChatGPT search, we actually saw a decrease in people using Google search. And the whole stock market was like, oh my God, and Google shares sold off by 8%.
It's happening.
Right.
Yep.
And then Google came out with the Iraqi information minister and said, no, don't be afraid of this. The stock went up. But just the sign they could potentially be losing a little bit of market share to Perplexity, ChatGPT search is already getting people on the edge. But I think in order for the company to switch from the old search model to pure AI, there would be a rough transitionary process where they wouldn't be able to maybe juice up the same earning per share that Wall Street would want. And I don't know if Sundar would be the person to do that because you would have to make some drastic changes internally in the company. That's always tough.
Well, and you made the point about how cheap their money is too, right? I think Perplexity is trying to raise money right now at some crazy valuation, like 9 billion or 14 billion or something like that.
Yeah, 14 billion. They're trying to raise 500 million. They're close to closing.
So I would say these different AI companies, if they're perceived as AI companies, have an incredible amount of cash and an easy ability to raise more. So they can get away with losing money on queries that are very expensive to process. Google can't do that. I mean, if they suddenly put Gemini right in the Google search box for every single query, they would immediately lose a god-awful amount of money and probably melt down a bunch of their data centers. So their transition is much trickier. This is the situation that Microsoft was in where Windows was the cash cow. And if you were inside Microsoft and you proposed a project that didn't also promote Windows, it wasn't enough that it was neutral or unrelated. It had to actively promote Windows, or your project would be canceled. And they knew that internally. They would say it out loud. They'd be like, Windows is the platform. Your project should be promoting Windows, or we see no reason to fund it. And that's, they missed out on a whole bunch of important things that happen in the industry as a result.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe Google can take kind of a lesson from that to figure out how to go forward, because obviously AI seems like a much bigger thing than search. I mean, search is incredible. Obviously, they had this cash cow for so long, one of the best business models. But if it's going, I find myself using deep search more and more across various things. OpenAI, when it came out, recently been trying doing deep search with Google 2.5 Pro, and it's just incredible. I'm blown away by how.
Is it as good as OpenAI's deep search?
I think it's better. I've been using it in the last week or so, and
That's an endorsement.
Yeah, it's I love it how deep it goes, and how it really captures exactly what you're going for, and also it really filters, because I've tried also on the Grok doing their stuff. Grok seems to be like a kind of doesn't there's less critical thinking, like it doesn't dismiss stuff that doesn't make sense. I mean,
Talk about
Would that
damning with faint praise.
Does it have to do anything with Twitter brain rot affecting Grok? Remember,
That's critical thinking.
I was told Elon, the data set of every other week of someone saying Hitler did nothing wrong is worth so much for Grok. For billions of dollars. It's going to improve its ability to think. Go ahead.
Well, I'm curious to see what 3.5 will look like. So, I mean, they're definitely catching up because they had a late start. But so far, so I mean, OpenAI, when they launched deep research, it was great. I haven't tried, up until like a week ago, I haven't tried Google's deep research. I've tried the one that's powered by 2.5 Pro, and it is just phenomenal. It's absolutely incredible. So I'll keep testing it, but the thing is, like back in the days when I used to do these kind of deep dives that I need to do research for, it would be between, like dozens of Google searches, right? going
hmm
on Reddit, going down rabbit holes on Reddit, or just Google searches and all the other stuff. And now that's replaced with, as soon as an idea pops in my head, I jot it down into deep research. I hit go, and then usually you have to wait 5 to 10 minutes, right? So you go do your thing, and later you're like, oh, here's this massive report that I have to digest, but it's
hmm
just phenomenal. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love everything about it. So I don't see how that doesn't affect search volume, because that
Yeah.
just eats,
Yeah.
20 to, let's say, 100 searches that I would have done otherwise.
Right. No,
Yeah, there's so many places we could go with that as different topics. But I'm impressed that you think the Google one is that good. Have you you must have read some of the papers about OpenAI's implementation of open research, um,
I have not.
deep research, versus Google's implementation, because they're very different under the hood.
Interesting. I will definitely check it out, because I've been kind of ignoring. I really liked OpenAI's deep research, and I have dozens of more. I probably have 100 plus, maybe 200 since they've launched, because I have the unlimited plans. I just, whatever pops into my head, I launch it in there. So definitely,
Yep.
probably in the hundreds of deep researchers on OpenAI. In the last week, I started just on a whim doing Google. And so far, it's only a handful, but those handful have been absolutely mind blowing. So I got to do more research, but I
to the
will.
More
point of
research
like,
on deep research.
are you
Yeah,
saying
exactly.
are you saying like 20% better than the OpenAI's deep research, 30%, or to the point where like
You want to pin them
I
down.
would never use OpenAI deep research again? Because what I have going with me is a switching cost of I'm so used to using OpenAI for everything. And the moment I hear from some, oh, this new product over here is doing something cool, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach myself to use it. And then OpenAI is like, oh yeah, we just took that feature. I'm like, God damn it. No, I didn't. Go back to where I was.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to say, because I haven't made my mind up, and it's just from the few interactions. Like, one of them, I was looking at trying to see what a lot of people that like are creative types and produce a lot of like creative work. I was curious if there's any sort of overlap in their day-to-day schedule, if there's any stuff that they tend to, some commonalities that they tend to do. Like, do they wake up
Mm-hmm.
early or later? Do they do meditation or this?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like threw that in there. And wow, it blew me away, because first of all, it starts out, it had this like great title. I forget what it was, but it was like very like artistic, which usually it doesn't do that big, because this was more like creative work. It had like a very creative title, and it just from the get go starts hitting you with interesting facts about Mozart and the various writers and the various people, like the fact that they all engaged in early morning activities where they would walk on
Mm-hmm.
this. Then it went through how many of them used to do TM, transcendental meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and like the
Mm-hmm.
quotes about that. So so I had an idea, like, okay, is there anything I can add to my day to just be able to just kind of have more energy and kind of
Yeah, yeah.
create? Yeah. And within the first paragraph, I was like, wow, like there's so much here, so well written, so well
Outstanding.
researched. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one I did was various things for like stress management and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blown away by how deep it went. Because first it went, okay, here's what stress is. You can think of it as these 4 biological factors. Here are the research that supports the best things against that. And here are the sort of pathways by which you might do that. So like, if you go running, what does that do? That's it helps with the neurotransmitters,
Mm-hmm.
serotonin, but also it does this and this and this and this. So as you're sitting there, and it links to all the research papers and stuff like that. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is, because there's no fluff, there's no BS. Because like with Grok, it's
Dope.
like some people
Pure dope.
enjoy, yeah, yeah. Because with Grok, it's like, well, some people enjoy like walking in nature, so that might be something to try. And it's like, okay, maybe not, but like, I'm not seeing like the stuff you're referencing in the citations. It's a little bit weak. I mean, I get it, but I could have went to whatever healthline.com and found that
Mm-hmm.
information. Google is like, no, like here's and I forget, like there's some sort of a method for rating how much confidence you have in a study. It was like Davis's G, or I forget, unfortunately, but it ranked them all by how. So it's like cognitive behavior therapy versus
Mm-hmm.
aerobic
Mm-hmm.
exercise versus yoga versus this, and it ranked them. And I was like, it seemed like a lot of thought and effort went into that. Like, I don't know how much.
Okay, I'll try it, damn it.
Yes, yeah. Oh,
do you have an affiliate link I can click so you can get your $10 from Google?
Hammering on Jordan. Hounding.
You win. Stop the count, not in the face.
I forgot the original question. I just went out through
No,
my
that's
own
like, that's
tangent.
my life. I always forget the original question. I'm just like, whatever.
This kind
Go.
of feature is just such a attractive thing for someone who is interested in getting the complete picture and seeing all the links to the research in case they want to dive in. Especially if the model or the framework, depending on how it's implemented, has gone and actually looked at all those studies in detail in order to rank them. That's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
done
really.
like to your point, you could have done all those searches yourself and you would have spent hours putting that together.
Oh, yeah.
And, depending on how long you spent, done as good of a job or not, I'm actually really curious about something you said earlier, all the research and projects you're seeing. And I guess to be kind of specific, how far away do you think we are from simulated people in meetings that are completely well simulated and you can't really tell?
North Korea is listening right now because they've been trying to do it for a while. Go ahead.
Oh, interesting.
Like right now, we can't really tell when we go to ChatGPT and we
Mhm.
pick the most recent model. Like it passes the Turing test.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Sesame AI and their voice, the empathetic voices. Those are pretty damn good. Like it's hard to tell if it's a real person or a simulated voice. And you've probably seen a couple of services that are already producing video in almost real time, right?
Yep. Yeah, I've tried an open source project. I forget what it was called. But yeah, basically you upload any video in real time. Like it made me look like Elon Musk, Sam Altman. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was all right.
Oh,
It
it's
was
copying your movements and your
Yeah.
speech.
real time, and I can shine a light on myself, and it like realistically
Mhm,
sort of trace
mhm.
that light and stuff like that. So now, so you're saying it simulate people. You're saying, so can it simulate somebody like a real person to fool somebody that knows that person, or just simulate any random person?
Oh, that's a
Do you
good
know what I mean?
question. Let's assume it's not someone you know, but you've probably seen examples where you can give it a photograph or a short video clip,
Yeah.
and then you can say, okay, now give me that person speaking this script,
Yeah.
right? And you can imagine coupling that with a language model would allow for it to engage in a conversation.
Yeah. No, I feel like we're pretty close in terms of like the fidelity of the sound and the video. I mean, video is still a bit choppy. The sound I feel like is almost there. With the sound, like if you listen to it long enough, you realize it misses the like the intonations, because I guess it's not trained on what intonations mean, what specific thing. So it fails at those, but in terms of just sounding like a real person, it's there. Video, mostly there. Hey Jen is doing their Avatar 4, whatever it is. I feel like we're so close to, just if we're talking about like the fooling the senses, I think we're very close to that. In terms of long term fooling people, like as if it's the other person that has enough context about the previous conversation to keep like if you have a long enough conversation, can reference stuff from some inside joke
mhm.
from last time or whatever. That's where it seems to fall apart. And
Mm.
most
Yeah,
of these
we're still at that Brian Johnson moment where it's like uncanny valley. Like I want to live forever, but then my face looks like Bishop from the Aliens. Like we're gonna get there,
yeah. Yeah, but I feel like, yeah, and so the interesting thing to me is like the whole idea of like the long-term coherence. That's where stuff really falls apart, whether you're talking to a large language model or the AI agents. Like OpenAI did a thing where it's like, can these AI agents replicate machine learning papers? So if there's some experiment that's proposed, can it replicate the code, run that? And it's
Mhm.
like, it's tested against machine learning people with PhDs or like studying for that. And so the AI agents are just so much better out the gate. They're like, boom, they start copying the code, they start running, but then they plateau and humans slowly catch up and supersede them. So we win at the long context game. And the same thing with some of the studies that recently came out. It's just these AI agents break down over time. And that feels like the biggest stumbling block to really having AI agents. Like if somebody's able to solve that issue, I think it's going to go hard.
Mm.
So I want to, we're running out of time. I want to get into that because there's been so many companies just banging the door on AI agents 24/7. But then if you work inside those companies, most of the employees are like, these things don't work. They suck.
Yeah.
And they're convincing everyone like this is the way to go forward. And my real test is I will know the AI agents have arrived when you have managers saying, I'm willing to sacrifice headcount in order to get an AI agent.
Mm.
I am willing to not increase incremental headcount growth because I want an AI agent.
Yeah, that's a good test.
And so far, I don't know anyone worth their salt besides some random person on Twitter who's just smoking crack who says, yeah, I'm running everything by AI agents and blah, blah, blah. And so maybe that's where we can do part 2 of this conversation, go into that and what you think about it. Because that's what really got me into this is there's so much bullshit work out there in corporate that I was like, oh, ChatGPT could end this so I can focus on things I want to do. Not the whole, I'm going to replace all employees AGI tomorrow, but just more of the bullshit work.
The task versus job approach.
Yeah, like dealing with Workday or Concur and things like that. No one wants to do that. Not even the people who build Workday want to touch Workday. So why should I touch it? So anyways, for all of you who are watching, you can watch part 1 here. We also create a playlist specifically for Wes Roth viewers for some of our videos. And thank you, Wes, for joining us. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. I love chatting with you guys. I've learned so much, so I do appreciate that. We definitely should do it again because this was absolutely incredible. This was very valuable to me. Hopefully it was valuable to all the watchers and listeners, and I would absolutely, would love to do it again one day.